Hey, how's it going? I'm Ella Feingold. I'm an orchestrator. I hope you're doing really well. So let's dig in. This is a cue from the film Boxing Day that I orchestrated. I'm told it's coming out this Friday on Amazon Prime, and I just wanted to break down a particular part of this cue. So let's have a listen here to the soundtrack. Cool. Okay, let's jump right in here. Let me just move this out of the way. Okay. So this is the sketch. This is an earlier version of the sketch. I couldn't find the final sketch, so you'll notice that this rhythm here is supposed to be septuplet, and these are harp glisses. So I want to just first discuss, as I'm looking at the sketch, sort of what are the things that are going through my mind, and then how I orchestrated it and how I've solved some problems and what I was striving for with the orchestration. So without even looking at the page at all, I know that this just needs to be lyrical. The melody and the counter melodies need to really sing, and it just needs to be very full sounding and passionate, and so that's what I'm striving for. That might sound pretty obvious, but I've noticed sometimes with students that they just sort of can orchestrate bar by bar without sort of thinking about the whole picture. How are we getting to this big moment? What's happening before it? How much color do I need? How much contrast do I need here? How do we get out of this moment? So just something to keep in mind. Look beyond the MIDI. We as working orchestrators for other composers, yes, we have to, quote, do the MIDI and refine and sculpt where needed, but really forget about the MIDI for a second and just listen to what the music's, telling you. Okay, enough. Shut up, Ella. Show us what you did. So if I were to look at this, and if I take a look at the woodwinds here, I've got some woodwinds inside the staff, and I already know that for a big moment like this, that these people here are likely to get covered up. So that's one sort of problem I'm anticipating. The next thing is I have brass, and this is just higher than I really would like for the horns. This is all in concert. We don't have descant horns, so I know that I need to solve this problem somehow with this melody here. And because this is a 2D moment, I also know that I need the whole choir of brass. Okay. Timpani's fine. The piano is a pre-record, which means that it's not live piano. So I don't really need to concern myself with this. The harp just needed to be quantized. I know that these are glisses. And I see that, there are a few different ideas going on in the strings with the melody and counter melodies and bass line. And so I'm sort of looking at the strings, and I'm looking at what's in the piano as sort of my guide. So when we learn the craft of orchestration, we're always taught to make every section sound complete unto itself, and that every every musician, when they're reading their part, that they should have a sense of how their part fits in with the music. And both of those things are very true. And especially in today's day and age, when we're recording every section separately, which is called striping, which I don't love because it turns every section sort of into an audition and other reasons. But you really need to make the music sound whole unto itself, because the brass come in at lunch, and the composers are listening to the brass for half of a day, and then the strings come in and the woodwinds come in. So you really need to make sure everything sounds whole. So in Charles-Marie Widor's book, he talks about that every section should have bass and have complete choir and everything. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think then you run the risk of things sounding gray when you have harmony in every single choir. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I'd say as a general rule, definitely harmony in one choir, and 2 is okay. 3, you've kind of made a mistake if you have it in 3 choirs, And in this kind of music that's really emotional, not to be crude, but it's really about figuring out what choir you want to have the harmony, and everybody else just sort of has melody and bass line. I mean, if you look at there's a page in Daphnis and Chloe that's just incredibly rich and emotional, and it's like all the strings in octaves, the basses are in octaves on the bass line. There's no harmony in the strings. The woodwinds have all the melody, with the strings, and it's only the brass that have harmony in the middle. And I think he might have a couple of flutes or oboes up high, just acting as upper partials. So the recipe is sort of a lot of people on the melody and only one choir with the harmony. So just something I would sort of suggest. I don't know, it sort of makes me think of like James Horner's music or Jerry Goldsmith or something. A lot of people on the melody. And that's basically what I did here. I just have, for the most part, harmony in the brass, and everyone else is getting melody. So speaking about every section sounding complete unto itself, I just wanted to play you every section here. This is Sibelius and this is Note Performer. So there are certain things with the playback that are just not reality. Like the basses sound incredibly heavy here, but in real situation, they're fine. They're not going to overpower. So yeah, why don't I play you every section individually so you can just get a sense. So that's the strings. Now the brass I want to break up into 2 separate pieces. So I want to play just what I did here with harmony and sort of some of the melody here. Like with playback, these are poco hairpins, meaning, pochissimo. I do that a lot because I don't want them to swell too much, but with Note Performer, it makes it into like this mezzo forte kind of swell. Anyway, and now the horns. Okay, and lastly the woodwinds. Okay, so I think you'll agree that, every section sounds whole unto itself, and that I'd like to think that every player has a sense of how their part fits in. So I'm not going to play the harp, I'll talk about what I did, but there's no sense. So what you'll notice is that there's no copy paste here. I'm engaged in every line going left to right, and I'm really paying attention to the part writing. And it's just something that you need to do when you orchestrate. If you're just simply copying and pasting things around the score and going, cool, that goes to the flute, okay, that's done. Cool, that goes to the bassoon, that's done. You're really missing out on a lot of the craft. So definitely pay attention to the part writing. I mean, yes, we're thinking vertically, but we also need to, think horizontally as well. So how did I solve some of these problems? So let's go back to the woodwinds where I started. So I don't mind having this in the staff, because I'm just sort of looking at these woodwinds as sort of with the horns and supporting. And what I actually, I sort of gave the surprise away, but what I ended up doing is putting a lot in the horns that wasn't there at all, because I know that they can project and just sound good with what this music is suggesting. So I'm really looking at the woodwinds as helping. I added a piccolo because I wanted brilliance to really, push out some of this stuff, especially with the septuplet run. And I've got bassoon and bass clarinet, on the line, and they're sort of with these people, and then they're helping here, and the clarinets come in, and then they're out and they breathe, and there's, touches of harmony right here and harmony here. And I really just sort of went section by section. Just what is the harmony? How can I make this sound complete by itself? If I had woodwinds, if I had more winds, like I only have one bassoon. If I had two bassoons or one bassoon and one contrabassoon, I would definitely give the contra, the bass line. So that's sort of how I thought about the winds, just going left to right. So with the brass, this was too high for the horn, and I put it on a flugelhorn because the flugel has a horn-like quality, and so it was just the right call. Flugel can always pretend to be a high horn. And so with the horns, I wrote round tone here because it's, poco F, it's loud, project, and I didn't want to run the risk of it getting too brassy, too cuivre. So I wrote round tone, or sometimes I'll just write warmly or something to just make sure that they don't know to, that they don't play something very brassy and harsh. So as far as the brass goes, you'll notice that I sort of split the choir in half. That I was quite literal here with taking what was in the horn and giving it to the flugel, and that I put the melody here in the horn, and you'll notice that they're in unison here, and then here that they sort of go into a touch of harmony, and then they split into an octave here, and then they're in unison and harmony again. So they're all over the place, Timpani, I was quite literal. Harp was literal. The piano was literal. The harp, the only thing I added is I had the luxury of having two harps, so I had the second harp just do the bass line, and I had them do it non-arp, meaning non-arpeggiated. I just wanted to make sure that it was a very clean attack with both notes, rather than risking a little bit of a flam. And with the strings here, I put in some, some bowing, and yeah, that was really it. So yeah, I just wanted to show this cue to just talk about the part writing and how things were filled out more. You know, this was all that was in the brass, and if you'll notice, I put harmony in the trombones. You know, I filled out the harmony with trombones, and there was no bass lines, so I, took what was in the contrabasses, I phrased it differently, you know, with slurs, and then I added an upper octave here that is in the strings here, but you'll notice it's not in the strings here, but it's in the brass. And why didn't I use the upper octave in the basses? And the reason is I didn't want to divide the basses. It's forte. I mean, I love dividing basses more than most. It's just something I love doing. But I didn't divide them here just because I simply wanted the power. And that's why I kept them in unison and chose to divide and put the octaves here in the brass, and it ended up sounding great. So I think that's it. I mean, the only other thing I suppose I could point out is a really small detail that because this music is loud and then sort of, diminuendoing, actually, in the original version, there was a longer sort of wind down, but there were edits that were made, so we sort of got out of the gesture a lot quicker than the previous version, and, those things happen. So, I mean, one very, very small touch was that you'll notice here that this is a two-handed gliss. And one way to orchestrate the dynamics and the diminuendo is I kept the left hand out here, and it's just in one octave. It's a very small detail, but that's one sort of recipe to orchestrate the dynamic, orchestrate the diminuendo. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else really worth mentioning, but if you have any questions, please write them in the comments and let me know, and I'll check you on the next one. All right. Don't forget to love yourself and each other.